know, in the customer's shoes, I understand that this is a big expense. You know, this is an expensive car, you're making payments on it. You don't expect something like this to happen. And this is the problem with, you know, having off-the-shelf tunes. And I'm not by any means painting a bad picture here for Cobb. This is just the moral of the story. This is the kind of stuff you run into when you aren't paying a tuner to physically go through and make the car perfect. What's up everyone, I'm Logan with 89 Auto Works, and today we are working on Q's 2016 STI. This car is in here. We have some issues with the DAM dropping, and the wastegate duty cycle is kind of going crazy, fluctuating all over the place, and we have no actual ideas on why either of those are happening. So today we are going to dive into compression testing this car, figuring out exactly what's wrong with it, and then moving forward to probably going ahead and having a pro tune done on this car and utilizing the Cobb Acessport for logging, doing a pro tune, and then also getting this car just absolutely dialed for Q. Today we are in Q's 2016 STI, really nice car, and basically we're having some issues today with this thing having a low DAM value, and also having a, I guess, weird wastegate duty cycle problem. So we are going to do a little driving today, get some logs on this thing. This is a Acessport car, so this thing is running basically a just off-the-shelf tune. Nothing crazy there, but we are having problems with it, so we're gonna go ahead and do some logging in this thing, get her warmed up, and then get it in the shop and kind of get an idea on what's actually going on with the car. Start looking at some things like compression. We're gonna compression test this thing, do another boost leak test on this thing, and just basically make sure there's no actual problems with any of those things. So basically on this thing, we're gonna be going ahead and finding compression numbers. If we have a low compression number, we're gonna go ahead and go through this thing and figure out exactly what the leak down numbers are. I don't have a ton of suspicion on this thing actually having a bad motor. Now I'm not ruling out the fact that the motor itself could be making noise. It's a Subaru. It's an EJ257. It's not a Type RA. This is just a EJ257 running an Acessport off-the-shelf tune. Not to speak negatively on Cobb, but we have had plenty of issues in the past with off-the-shelf tunes and blowing up motors. Off-the-shelf tunes are designed for a specific part and a specific running condition on these cars, and if you are not using that exact part and that exact running condition and you have any other variable that hops into the situation, the biggest problem you run into is things don't exactly line up like you want them to. If you aren't running exactly what Cobb outlines as what you're supposed to be running on these cars, you're wasting your time and you're running a very, very large risk of blowing your car up. Up until recent times, I would say a year ago, I would have told you that an Acessport was absolutely garbage and, you know, you're wasting your time buying one at all. I retract that statement entirely, and the biggest reason being is because if you do your due diligence and you physically buy the parts for these cars that are meant to be on these cars, Cobb has spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on research and development on these tunes to be able to have them go on just about any car that fits in that description and not have issues. Typically speaking, if you have the parts that line up and your car does not have low compression or low fuel pressure or any of those things, the tunes will work just fine. You might pull a little bit of timing here and there, but it shouldn't be anything crazy. So this car is no different. This car, the things it does have going for it, it has Cobb SF intake. It has a IAG V3 Street AOS. It has a Grimspeed catted downpipe, an NVIDIA exhaust, catback exhaust, and that's about it. This car is and it does have the HKS SSQV bypass valve, and it is physically set up as a bypass valve. It is not set up as a blow-off valve. And this car was set up this way. I set this stuff up this way. We did logging, we did everything we could do to make sure that the off-the-shelf tune that we were running in this case was going to line up physically and not cause issues with the motor. There was no big negative anything as far as the motor pulling timing, the motor hearing noise, the motor, anything the motor didn't like. Fuel trims were nice, and all of those things, all the fine learning knock and actual feedback knock. We weren't getting anything crazy. To see 1, maybe 2 points of fine learning knock on these cars, that's not anything too crazy. Ideally would want to have it at 0, especially in a scenario where it's leaving the tuning shop or my shop in this case. You ideally would want it to be 0. That's what the goal is always, but to have 1 point, as long as it's not something that you're having that point of knock at wide open throttle, and it's just something you're having happen somewhere in the power band, you're probably going to be fine. But you could have a problem if it was in the hands of somebody that didn't know what they were doing. We're gonna dive into this thing, gonna go jump in and start popping some of these parts off of here, get spark plugs out of it, look at the spark plugs, do a thorough diagnosis on the spark plugs, make sure we're not seeing any metal, oil, or impurities, things that are not ideal. Spark plug gap needs to be dialed, all of those things. While we have those out, we'll go ahead and compression test each cylinder. What's up, everyone? I'm going to take this time to go ahead and say smash that subscribe button, hit like, make a comment, tell me what you guys are thinking about the video, and stick around for the next one, because there is so many videos I have filmed and ready to go. I mean, you guys would be foolish to not stick around and see what we have next. I have so many cool projects coming up, and if you guys like fast Subarus, then probably better stick around. We are going to be firing this thing up, let it warm up for a bit, get the engine nice and hot. Then we are going to go ahead and strip out the intake box, strip out the battery for now, and we're going to go ahead and get a compression test, get full numbers on that. Once we have a compression test, that'll be a great time for us to take a look at the spark plugs on the table and actually physically get a really good idea of what spark plugs should be looking like in a car with a build like this, which is a pretty mild build. So we're gonna jump right to it. I'm gonna pop this thing off and let it warm up. So for those of you that don't know, the whole reason we are warming this car up before we compression test it, obviously if you understand thermodynamics, you're basically having the pistons and cylinder walls and everything is getting warmed up, which takes and drops your piston ring gap down slightly and closes down the gap, so you are actually building true compression numbers. Whereas if we were to do this when the engine was cold, the piston rings do not seal to the cylinders as well. On a bone stock car like this with pretty tight piston ring gap, it's not as essential, but on a built motor, if you are doing this with a cold engine, I mean, you can see the difference of 30 to 40 PSI per cylinder. All right, so we are going to go ahead and grab some tools, gloves, all of that, and start tearing this thing apart so we can get to the pistons, get to the spark plug so we can do a compression test. Relays are coming in here, and on these newer cars, you got to lift up on the coil pack clips. On the older cars, you have to push in on the coil pack clips. So this car only has like 65,000 miles, so we shouldn't be seeing anything at all that's like crazy wrong here. So this is where my 1/4-inch swivels come into play. This is most definitely the place I use them the most. So the trick to getting this one out back in there, in between the frame rail, is to sits in there like that, you twist it down and lift it up and out. That's the only way it'll actually come out. So nothing too crazy here. It's pretty nice brownish, goldish burn, which is more or less what you're looking for. If you saw white, that would be lean. If you saw black, that would be signifying that it is super rich. So we can look at them for a later time. Thing that's nice about Subarus is they come with a built-in spark plug holder. Built-in spark plug holder. It is important to unhook the coil packs on the other side of the engine before you try to crank this thing up. You want the motor cranking, not trying to start. Best practice would be to always, if you're compression testing this cylinder, whatever cylinder you're compression testing would be the only one that has a spark plug removed would be best practice, just to keep the compression of the motor itself in a nice, happy place. So on this cylinder right here, we are showing about 145 PSI. So we'll pop that back out. Put our spark plug back in the motor. So that one's a little bit darker, but still has pretty much the same nice even burn. Doesn't seem to be anything too crazy about that one. So that cylinder, we are at like 135. So slightly lower, but still nothing that's some crazy number right now. So cylinder 2 definitely has some anti-seize on it. Also a nice clean even other than my anti-seize that's on there. Actually don't need to put anti-seize on these things. When I first started doing Subarus, you know, it's a easy thing to assume aluminum cylinder heads, steel spark plug. If you don't know what happens there. They fall in love and they're married forever. The end. Kind of concerning. That's 120 PSI on cylinder 2. That's 25 PSI less than cylinder 1. To me, that tells me there's a problem. It's not necessarily catastrophic in the way that car is going to blow up, but it is a problem in the way that that's kind of mediocre numbers for a 60,000 mile STI. So definitely not thrilled on that. All right, guys, so this is your pro tip for the day here. Basically, you can take and pop off these engine mount bolts and oh Jesus, that's on there. Hulk put that one on. You didn't even know there was such thing as Japanese Hulk, did you? You didn't. All right, so there we have contact. You can see it's just very slightly lifting up. And now you have a very nice, easy, straight shot to pulling cylinder 4 spark plug. I guess I shouldn't say easy, it's just easier. Yeah, I mean, this spark plug looks pretty good too. About what you'd expect. So that one is actually even less. And we're looking at 115 PSI on that cylinder. So as far as I'm concerned, this motor is got some issues. Typically speaking, you wouldn't want to be seeing anything more than 10 PSI difference between cylinders, and especially on a stock block car like this, it's not good. Yeah, it's definitely not good. I would say that in this position, I'd be leaning towards valve lash, but there's no way for me to be able to truly actually tell that without doing a leak down test, which clearly is where we're headed with this. So it's actually a little bit below 115 PSI. It's at roughly like 114 or 113 psi. So that's where we're at on this thing. We got compression numbers across the motor, and basically now it's time for me to go call Q and fill him in on what we've found so far. See if he wants us to go as far as going in and doing a leak down test, and from there, if he does want us to do that, then we can go ahead and do that, and we'll show the process on how to do that. So basically, with seeing the compression numbers that we've seen, it doesn't pay for me to go ahead right now and leak down test the thing and do all the other tests we were planning on doing. I was not planning on finding something this quick or simple that was going to be, I guess, jumping out as much as it has. Having compression numbers being 35 psi apart in between cylinders is absolutely not good. In my professional opinion, that is grounds for a rebuild. You could be more than that, but this is the whole deal, is that when you have lower compression in one cylinder than the other, the amount of timing that cylinder will be able to handle without pre-detonation is significantly different than a cylinder with 150 or, you know, perfect compression. So in this case, if he were to take this car, which is what he's going to do, he's going to take this car and drive it for a bit, and I mean, we're talking, you know, several $1,000s to fix this car. So, you know, he's going to take the car and drive it for a while and put some money together before we actually physically take and, you know, fix it. In the customer's shoes, I understand that this is a big expense. You know, this is an expensive car, you're making payments on it. You don't expect something like this to happen. And this is the problem with, you know, having off-the-shelf tunes. And I'm not by any means painting a bad picture here for Cobb. This is just the moral of the story. This is the kind of stuff you run into when you aren't paying a tuner to physically go through and make the car perfect. When you are having the car be, the tune at best was good, you know, it wasn't a huge problem. We never saw huge issues, but clearly we have a problem. And, you know, just goes to show you that if you do not take care of your car, especially your Subaru, you are going to regret it. It will not forget it, and it will absolutely take every penny you'll ever have again from you. For one, pay for a Pro Tune. For two, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, you know, moral of the story. Take care of your car, run good fuel, pay for a Pro Tune, pay for a Pro Tune, pay for a Pro Tune. Let's see here. Pay for a Pro Tune, pay for a Pro Tune, pay for a Pro Tune. Pro tuning is there for a reason. There is tuners that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because they have a job that is critical. You cannot make horsepower without somebody behind the keyboard clicking keys, making it happen. I don't care what you bolt on a car. I don't care what parts you have. I don't care. Nothing will happen. You will gain next to no horsepower if you do not pay for a Pro Tune. This car should not be having these problems. Definitely should not be having these problems. And the fact that it is pretty concerning. You know, it's a 65,000 mile 2016 STI. Why are we having problems like this? Well, in my opinion, it would have to come back to being tune related, or we have some sort of premature valve train wear that, you know, is causing a valve to hang open, or we have a cracked valve seat, or we have a broken valve, or, you know, and just due to the fact that we still are making 113 psi, I would say that we probably have valve lash being a problem. But if you're already that far into the motor and you're that far in there, there's no way you're not going to, you know, address all of the other problems that could be there or, you know, will be there. So with that being said, we are going to wrap this video up. I appreciate you guys watching. Like and subscribe to the channel. I can absolutely assure you that you will see this car again on this channel, and it will likely be when we're doing the full rebuild. And at that point in time, we will take the time to go and actually do a full leak down test on the motor and show you guys exactly what to expect or what you could expect to see if you were having a problem like Q is here. So with that being said, I'm going to end it, guys. Thanks again.